Hi friends, welcome to Psychology Noir with Dr. Lund, and I am Dr. Lund. I keep saying that, but I am. What I wanted to get into today was my thoughts, just my opinions, in reviewing some of the conversations, the audio tapes between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, some that we heard during the trial, some that were more expansive that I had found on YouTube, and get a sense of the patterns that these two individuals had in their communication style that led to what I thought were some definite issues in communication and problem solving. What we heard from the trial, I think, were snapshots, and we have to remember that those audio tapes were snapshots of the couple's relationship, certainly not full conversations every day of how many ever years that these two were together. But I think in looking retro at some of the conversations, this might be helpful in looking forward to some of our conversations with significant others, looking at the importance of communication in relationships. And again, not making any diagnoses of anyone, but if the diagnoses proposed for Amber and the issues with addictions for Johnny, this may give some insight into how we might look at making communication better and clearer, especially if you find yourself in some of these communication traps. Definitely in reviewing the audio tapes, there were definite attempts at trying to address some of the issues of when Amber felt uncomfortable or felt hurt, when Johnny was trying to express some of his reasons and rationales for the things he was doing or wanting to do or wanting to avoid. But unfortunately, as these conversations progressed, they got into a loop. It was starting off in some very nice, healthy ways of presenting what the issues were, how it made each other feel. But then most of the conversations, again, that I reviewed didn't have a good problem-solving strategy. It seemed like both of them got into a loop of just getting into the weeds and redefining words and making the topic or the issue secondary to trying to pinpoint discrepancies of what the other meant and how it was interpreted. And it just became, again, just fighting upstream with very little or no resolution to the actual issue. For example, there was a discussion between Johnny and Amber about her requesting him to make an appointment with their couples therapist. She had gone to 2 or 3 meetings by herself and pointed out to him it was couples therapy and that he needed to make an appointment and make it a priority that he get to see the therapist they were working with. That very quickly turned into Johnny getting into the weeds of, well, if you're saying I need to make it a priority, then you're insinuating I don't think it is a priority. Lordy, it just went from bad to worse. And from that point, because they got stalled in the weeds, and as I had said in my first video and my second, there are only 2, that as anybody gets stressed, you fall back into your sort of pathology of origin that's familiar. When you feel stressed, when you feel attacked, when you feel defensive, that's usually a normal situation. That's a normal reaction for most of us, whether it's a healthy pathology or not so healthy. I guess by the word pathology, it would give the indication not the best coping mechanisms. But the loop just got further down the road into Nowheresville. And what happens is these two seem to have a communication pattern where the end result is they argue about how to argue. And the issue, the emotions that one or both are trying to relay to each other to move forward in the relationship gets totally lost, and then it becomes a how-to of, well, when I say this to you, you take it critically, and it goes off the track very quickly, which to me as a therapist shows these folks need somebody, or needed somebody, to be able to help move them past that, and to show that they're coming off the tracks and they're falling back into patterns, which by the end of sometimes hours of discussion, if you ask, so what did you all decide about the therapist or the priority or whatever the issue is, there's no answer. But they both have decided that neither one can argue well or express their emotions appropriately so it doesn't trigger the other. And that, again, is a recipe for just destruction. And it erodes the communication over time. So when anything is brought up, even something more benign, there seems to be more of a defensive posture, or Johnny anticipates the fight, which could definitely be appropriate. And then Amber anticipates the lack of response or reaction or resolution, and they both perform in this dysfunctional dance that gets them nowhere near resolution, which is unfortunate for two very bright people, but two folks that brought their pathology into the relationship, and that they don't understand each other's triggers. They may recognize some of them, but they don't understand the etiology of them, and neither one of them can seem to be able to move past and react in a more healthy and appropriate manner. So these arguments go nowhere. I would imagine that these arguments started early in the relationship, that at first may have appeared, as I think Amber had mentioned at one point during the trial, he liked when she was feisty. And this, again, it's interesting. Many times the things we find attractive about our partner are the very things later on in the relationship we don't like and we complain about. Like, oh, he had a great sense of humor. And then over the years, it's like, there is nothing funny about what this guy says. He thinks he's a comedian, but he's so not. And so that has always, again, been something interesting for me as a therapist to hear from many, many couples and many individuals. But the problem is, again, when you listen to the argument, even when it's a calm argument, and interestingly, when it's a calm argument, it is so much easier to hear the belittling, the gaslighting, the non-direct, it sounds direct communication, but it's not. And in some of these videotapes, I've heard Johnny do much of the same type of pattern, except he's fighting with a master at manipulation of conversations and issues. And so what usually happens is that he apologizes, he backs down, tries to avoid the situation any longer when he knows by experience over years and probably many, many arguments, he's not going to win. And even says that he doesn't seem to be able to make her happy. He always feels that he's the one in the wrong. And at a point in time, somebody, I think, with his addictive personality, and again, just my opinion, is he may not have a lot of ego strength. Usually strong individuals, strong ego strength, strong and healthy folks will not tolerate that kind of verbal sword fighting because they see it's a no-win situation. It doesn't have a resolution, and the partner always will come out as the loser, somehow as the one who doesn't know how to communicate, doesn't articulate, doesn't see the priority, doesn't, or does in a bad way. And that's a tough role to always be in that place. Or maybe get a little positive reinforcement for listening, but then it always goes back to the loop. And for one partner, the loop is never successful. And for the other one, they may claim to be the winner of that loop, but they've actually not won anything. It's more practicing your verbal sparring. But what you're doing is the constant belittling is almost systematically brainwashing your partner while they're losing self-respect, they're losing self-confidence, they're second-guessing themselves, they may even be second-guessing their agenda if the partner that they love and adore is always feeling bad because of things that they're doing or have done intentionally or unintentionally. But again, there doesn't have a resolution to the problem, and that's really the major issue in looking at communication patterns is there a good problem-solving strategy?